He stopped because of the wrong note. Not because the playing was bad, because it was almost right. Three strings missing from a guitar that should have had six, and the melody still came through. Broken, but recognizable. That's what stopped him. Not the skill, the insistence. The girl was 11, maybe 12, sitting on the concrete in front of Sal's Pawn and Trade on Bleecker Street, Lower Manhattan, June of 1969. The sidewalk was hot enough to feel through denim. Her sneakers were two sizes too big. One lace was a shoelace. The other was a strip of electrical tape, knotted at both ends. The guitar in her lap was barely holding together. The top two strings were gone, snapped at some point, never replaced. The saddle had cracked down the middle. The fret markers were worn to pale ghosts, and still she played. Palm flat against the bridge, fingers finding positions on strings that buzzed more than they rang, coaxing something out of the instrument that the instrument wasn't really capable of giving. The song was Little Wing, his song. Jimi Hendrix had written it 2 years earlier, in a hotel room after a show he barely remembered. He'd been trying to put into notes something he'd never been able to say out loud. The song was about his mother, not directly, not with her name, but it was about her, about the idea of someone who arrives quietly and leaves fast, and takes the warmth of the room with them when they go. He'd never heard anyone play it on a sidewalk before. He'd been walking back from Mike Jeffries' office on West 57th Street. The meeting had lasted 40 minutes and accomplished nothing except making the number in Jimmy's head, the debt on Electric Lady Studios, feel heavier than it had that morning. Jeffrey had a way of doing that, making things feel already decided, already signed, and Jimmy was just catching up to a version of reality that had been arranged without him. He'd sat across the desk and nodded at the right moments and said very little, which was what he usually did in that office, because anything he said ended up meaning something different by the time Jeffrey was finished with it. He'd taken the subway down to the Village because he needed air, needed streets he recognized. He'd lived down here when he first came to New York, before any of it, before the experience, before London, before Monterey. He'd played for tips on these same blocks, different corners, same idea. Back then he'd had one pair of shoes and a Stratocaster he'd borrowed from a musician who'd since forgotten lending it, and most nights he ate whatever was left over at whatever bar would let him sit in. He hadn't been unhappy. He'd just been broke and unknown and 22 years old, which at the time felt like the same thing. He stood still and listened. Maybe 10 seconds, maybe 15. The girl hadn't looked up. 3 hours on a sidewalk teaches you that shoes stopping in front of you doesn't mean anything. Shoes stop all the time. They start walking again. The guitar case in front of her held $4 bills and some change, a crumpled receipt from a bodega. Someone had left a subway token, which was either kind or useless depending on where she was going. Jimmy crouched down. Not fast. Not the kind of crouch that's already halfway back to standing. He went all the way down, close enough to hear the actual sound the guitar made without any room to dress it up. Dry, woody, buzzing, an approximation of music. She stopped playing. She looked at him the way kids look at adults who get too close without an introduction. Flat. Waiting to find out what kind of person this was going to be. He didn't say anything right away. He looked at the guitar, at the headstock, where the two missing tuning pegs had left small holes, at the crack running from the sound hole up toward the shoulder. 3 strings, he said. I know, she said. Which ones? E and B on top, and the G's been buzzing since I got it. He reached over slowly, slow enough that she could pull the guitar back if she wanted to, and she didn't. His fingers found the G string, pressed it at the 3rd fret, plucked once. The buzz was a lifted fret, the wire pulling away from the wood. He pressed harder, and the note cleared, barely. You can push through it, he said, but your finger's going to hurt. It already hurts, she said. He sat down on the sidewalk, not crouching anymore, sitting, cross-legged, right there on the concrete in front of Sal's Pawn and Trade on a Tuesday in June, while the city moved past behind him. Before we hear what happened next, if you're watching this and you haven't subscribed yet, we're still a small channel, just getting started. A subscribe takes 5 seconds, and it's the only way to make sure the next story finds you. What's your name, he asked. Clara. Where'd you learn this song, Clara? She looked at him for a moment, deciding how much to say. My dad. He had a record. He'd play it Sunday mornings in the kitchen. Same record every Sunday. She looked down at the strings. He died last year. Jimmy didn't say he was sorry. People say they're sorry, and it doesn't help anything. He stayed where he was. What happened after? He asked. She told it in short sentences. Her father, James, had worked at a machine parts factory in the Bronx. One night in February, a wet road, a truck that didn't stop in time. Her mother had changed after that. Went quiet at first, then the quiet turned into something heavier. Clara had walked out 2 months ago, not run away. Running means you're going somewhere. She'd just left. Sal DiMaggio had come to the window of the pawn shop, 63 years old, 28 years behind that glass. He watched the man sitting on his sidewalk and recognized something in the way the man was listening. Not politely, not the way people listen when they're waiting for their turn to talk. The way you listen when what you're hearing is pulling something out of you. Sal had grown up in a house with a piano that nobody played, but nobody moved either, and he'd always thought he understood what music was worth. Watching through the glass now, he revised that number upward. He had a 1962 Telecaster on the wall that had come in 3 weeks back, brought in by a session guitarist who needed rent more than he needed the guitar. Sal had been waiting for the right buyer. He looked at the man on the sidewalk and decided the right buyer could wait a little longer. He went and got it. Jimmy's mother's name was Lucille. She left when he was 8, not like she packed a bag, but like she dissolved, gradually and then completely, until one day his father, Al, was just there and she wasn't. She died when Jimmy was 15. He found out 2 days after it happened. He didn't make it to the funeral. He was never sure if he wasn't told in time or if nobody thought to tell him at all. He never found the answer. What he got instead was a guitar. 3 months after she died, a neighbor gave him an acoustic with a warped top that wouldn't tune right. He played it for a year without asking whether he was good at it, because there was nobody around to ask. Clara's guitar wasn't much worse than that one had been. Show me what your right hand is doing, he said. She played the opening phrase. Her strumming arm was doing something close to right, but losing too much on the return stroke. Too much wrist, not enough snap. He reached over and placed 2 fingers lightly on the outside of her wrist and rotated it slightly. Not a correction, more like a suggestion. Try now. She played it again. The tone opened up a little. Less scratch, more note. She played it a 3rd time and went past the opening, into the first phrase of the melody, and it was, not polished, but real. It had shape. It had something behind it. Sal came out of the shop. He held the Telecaster out toward Jimmy without saying anything, the way you hand something to someone when you know they'll understand what you mean. Jimmy took it, checked the tuning by feel, adjusted 2 strings and played 1 chord. Clean and full. Clara stared at the sound. He played the opening of Little Wing, the real version, the way it was written. And there's something that happens when you've been circling a song for months and suddenly hear it played whole. It doesn't make you feel like you've been doing it wrong. It makes you feel like you've been doing something real that was pointing toward this. Clara sat still with her hands on the broken strings. He finished and held the Telecaster out to her. Try the chord. She took it. It was too big for her, proportionally. She had to reach. But her left hand found the shape. She strummed. 6 strings, no buzz, no gaps. The sound came out complete. Her face did something then. Not a smile exactly. The thing that comes just before a smile, when something you've been reaching for finally makes contact. Marcus Webb had slowed down on the sidewalk behind the small crowd that had formed. 20 years old, music conservatory student, soft case on his back. He'd been on his way to a practice room 3 blocks away, running 15 minutes late, the way he usually was. He'd stopped because he recognized the quality of what was happening. Not the song, not even the playing, but the attention around it. A dozen people standing on a New York sidewalk in June without anyone looking at their watch. Something was being paid here that didn't usually get paid on this street or any street. He unzipped his case and took out his own acoustic. He held it toward Clara without ceremony. "Keep it," he said. "I've got another one." He didn't have another one. He said it anyway. Clara set the broken guitar down next to the case with the $4 bills in it and took Marcus's. Ruth Simmons from the community center on Bank Street had been standing at the edge of the crowd for the last 10 minutes. She wrote her number on a piece of paper from her bag and crouched down next to Clara. "Call me," she said quietly. "I can help you find your mom." Jimmy stood up. He handed the Telecaster back to Sal with a look, and Sal took it. Then he reached into his pocket. He'd been carrying the pick since 1958. It was the first one he'd ever owned. Not borrowed, not taken from someone's kit, but bought. 15 cents from a music shop in Seattle, the week after his mother died, with money he'd saved from odd jobs. He'd bought it because he didn't have anything else from that time. After a while, it had been in his pocket long enough that taking it out felt wrong. 11 years. Seattle, Nashville, New York, London, back. It had been in his pocket at Monterey. In 2 months, it would be in his pocket at Woodstock, though he didn't know that yet. He held it out. Clara looked at it, looked at him. "So you remember today," he said. She took it. He walked. His hand went into his pocket by reflex, the way it had 10,000 times and found empty cloth. For a second it felt wrong. Then it didn't. Clara Hayes played music for the next 30 years. Not arenas. Small rooms, listening bars, stages that were flatbed trucks in open fields. She played the way people play when they don't know how to be themselves without it. Her first album, released in 1985, had a single line in the liner notes. "My father James taught me to hear music. A stranger on Bleecker Street taught me that hearing it was enough to begin." She kept the pick in her pocket every time she played. Every room, every show. She never said his name in interviews, not to protect the story, because the story was never about his name. It was about a Tuesday in June when someone sat down on concrete instead of walking past. And what that does, not to the person sitting on the ground, but to the one who decides to sit. His pocket was empty for the first time in 11 years. He walked lighter.